The twin suns of Zalera burned over the crowded alien bazaar. Strange creatures bartered in a dozen tongues. Neon lights flickered over stalls filled with fruits that glowed, metals that hummed, and weapons that looked alive. Among the chaos, a woman with pale blue skin moved quickly, her long cloak hiding the trembling child at her side. Her name was Lyra, once a princess of the Tsilian Empire, now a fugitive. Her daughter, Mira, clutched her hand tightly. Fear shimmered in the child's wide silver eyes. Behind them, heavy boots pounded the ground. A squad of mercenaries in jagged armor pushed through the crowd, their blasters drawn. "There! The traitor!" one of them barked. Panic spread like wildfire as vendors ducked for cover. Lyra turned a corner and found herself trapped against a high wall. The alley was a dead end. "Stay behind me," she whispered to Mira, drawing a small silver dagger. Her hands shook. She had never been trained for combat, not like her royal guards who were all dead now. The mercenaries stepped into the alley, sneering. "No more running, princess," the leader said. "The Empire wants you alive, but accidents happen." Before Lyra could reply, a lazy voice drifted in from behind the mercenaries. "Wow, rough crowd today. Someone forget to tip the barmaids again." The mercenaries turned. A human stood there, tall and unbothered, his clothes dusty, his hair a mess. He looked like any wanderer, except for the faint smile that tugged at his lips. A half-eaten fruit dangled from his fingers. "Move along, human," the leader snapped. "This isn't your concern." The man tilted his head. "Actually, I'm kind of making it my concern. You see, I was about to buy a drink, but now I'm more curious about why a bunch of tough guys are bullying a lady and her kid." Laughter rippled through the mercenaries. One spat at the ground. "You'll die where you stand." The man, who would later be known across systems as Jacksonville, dropped his fruit and smiled wider. 3 seconds, he said softly. "No blasters. Just hands." The mercenaries blinked. "What? I'll take all of you down in 3 seconds, Jackson said, stretching his fingers like a man warming up for a casual workout. "If I fail, you can sell me to whoever you want." "Deal." The leader barked a laugh. "You've lost your mind." "Probably," Jackson said. "Ready?" Before anyone could answer, he moved. The next moments were a blur. Jackson's arms became streaks of motion. He ducked under a swing, grabbed a blaster, and used it to smash another mercenary's helmet. His elbow cracked against a jaw. His boot sent another flying into a wall. In 3 heartbeats, the alley was filled with groans and the smell of ozone. The leader collapsed, staring at the human with disbelief. Jackson stood over them, calm as ever. "Huh," he said. 3 seconds exactly. Not bad for an off day." Lyra's mouth fell open. She had never seen anything move like that. Who are you?" He shrugged. "Just a guy who hates bullies." The child peeked out from behind her mother's leg. "Mommy, is he a superhero?" Jackson smiled faintly. "Nah. Superheroes have rules." He looked around, spotting a fruit stall still standing after the chaos. He picked up another glowing fruit and bit into it. "Ugh, tastes like acid. Why does everything on this planet taste like regret?" Lyra took a step forward, her fear replaced by desperate hope. "Please, you must help us. They'll keep coming. The Empire won't stop." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Empire, huh? Sounds like fun. But I don't do favors for free." "I can offer myself," Lyra blurted out. Her voice trembled. "I will serve you. Protect my daughter, and I will be yours." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then Jackson laughed, loud, genuine laughter that echoed off the walls. "You're serious? That's your offer?" Her cheeks darkened in humiliation. "Do you mock me?" "No," Jackson said, still grinning. "I just prefer challenges. Protecting you is too easy. How about this? I'll help you, but only using 1% of my strength. That'll keep things interesting." Lyra blinked. 1%? Are you insane?" Jackson's grin widened. "Probably. Now, let's get out of here before your fan club wakes up." As distant alarms began to sound through the market, Lyra realized that her fate, and her daughter's, had just been tied to a reckless human who treated danger like a game. And somehow, she felt safer than she had in years. The air of Zalera crackled with tension. Sirens blared through the marketplace as Imperial dropships began to descend, their engines screaming like angry beasts. Red light bathed the stalls, scattering shadows across the trembling ground. Vendors fled. Doors slammed shut. The world seemed to hold its breath. Lyra clutched Mira close, her heart pounding. "They found us again," she whispered. Jackson stretched his arms lazily, as if this was just another sunny afternoon. "Wow, fast response time. Either they really hate you, or I've just become famous." She shot him a glare. "You don't understand. Those aren't mercenaries this time. Those are Imperial enforcers. They'll burn this entire market just to catch us." Jackson's smile didn't fade. "Then let's make it a memorable party." Before Lyra could protest, he crouched beside her daughter and winked. "Hey, tiny starlight. You like fireworks?" Mira nodded timidly, eyes wide. "Perfect," he said, "because I'm about to make some." The first dropship hit the ground hard, dust and heat blasting across the square. Armored soldiers in gleaming black suits poured out, their rifles humming with plasma charge. They formed ranks with military precision, helmets turning in unison toward their targets. By decree of the Galactic Emperor, a voice boomed from a floating speaker drone. The fugitive Lyra of House Tsillian and her offspring are to surrender immediately. Resistance will result in extermination. Jackson sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Always with the extermination speeches. You'd think they'd try something new. "Jackson, we have to run," Lyra urged, her voice breaking. He glanced at her calmly. "Running's boring." He planted his feet, grounding himself on the cracked stone. "Let's play a game instead." "Game?" she echoed. "Yeah," Jackson said, his tone casual, almost cheerful. "New rule. I can't move my feet. Everything else is fair." Lyra's jaw dropped. "You'll die?" Jackson grinned. "You sound just like my last girlfriend." Then the sky lit up with plasma fire. Blazing bolts of blue energy tore through the air, searing past him. Jackson moved. Not his legs, but everything else. His torso twisted, his arms blurred. With almost impossible precision, he deflected the incoming blast using nothing but the air pressure from his palms. Each bolt curved mid-flight and slammed back into the soldiers who fired them. Explosions rippled through their ranks, smoke filling the square. Lyra could barely follow his movements. He wasn't fighting like a soldier. He moved like a force of nature. Calm, precise, effortless. One trooper tried to flank him, firing a grenade. Jackson flicked his wrist. The grenade froze mid-air, hovered for a moment, then zipped backward, straight into the dropship it came from. The explosion rocked the entire plaza. "Oops," Jackson said. "My bad." Mira squealed with laughter. "He's like a magician." Lyra couldn't help but stare. "No, he's something else entirely." When the smoke cleared, dozens of armored figures lay unconscious or sprawled across the wreckage. Jackson finally straightened, dusting his hands like a man who'd just finished sweeping the floor. "Well, that was a decent warm-up." Lyra blinked in disbelief. "A warm-up? You just took out an entire Imperial squad." He shrugged. "Yeah, but I was hoping for more of a challenge. Maybe they'll send someone interesting next time." Before she could answer, a deep rumble shook the ground. Overhead, a massive shadow passed across the sky. An Imperial cruiser, descending low enough that its metallic hull blotted out the twin suns. Its guns pivoted, locking onto their position. Lyra's blood ran cold. "We're doomed." Jackson's grin returned, sharper this time. "Now we're talking." He cracked his knuckles. "All right. New challenge. Steal a ship, break through that blockade, and reach hyperspace without getting bored." Lyra grabbed his arm. "That's impossible." He winked. "So was deflecting plasma with my hands. Come on, Blue. Let's make history." Before she could react, he scooped Mira effortlessly into one arm and took Lyra's hand with the other. Then he sprinted straight toward the spaceport, weaving through smoke and falling debris as the cruiser's cannons unleashed chaos on the city. Explosions thundered behind them. Buildings crumbled. The sky burned red. As they ran, Lyra risked a glance at Jackson. Amid all the fire and destruction, his face was calm, even joyful. For the first time in her life, she realized she was following someone completely insane. And yet, she didn't want to stop. Because deep down, something told her this human wasn't running from danger, he was running toward it. The smoke of the burning market followed them all the way to the edge of the Zalaran spaceport. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the metallic tang of ozone stung the air. Hundreds of ships sat docked across the sprawling landing field. Freighters, cargo haulers, luxury yachts, all guarded by Imperial troops. Above them, the cruiser's massive silhouette drifted closer, its engines rumbling like a storm about to break. Lyra clung to Mira as they crouched behind a stack of metal crates. "We can't go any farther," she whispered. "They've locked every exit. We're trapped." Jackson peeked around the crate, smirking. "You worry too much. We're not trapped. We're surrounded by options." "Options?" she hissed. "Do you call an army of armed soldiers an option?" He grinned. "Of course. Each one of them is about to be very generous with their donations of ships." Lyra blinked, not sure if he was serious. "You're insane." "Probably," he said. "But insanity is just creativity with worse marketing." Then he stood up, boldly. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "What are you doing?" "Shopping," Jackson said, dusting off his jacket. "I think I'll take the shiny one over there." Before she could stop him, he walked straight toward the center of the landing bay, unarmed, unarmored, and completely fearless. The nearest Imperial soldiers saw him instantly. "Halt! Identify yourself," one barked, rifle raised. "Sure," Jackson called back. "Name's Jackson Vale. Occupation, chaos enthusiast." They froze for a second, just long enough for him to move. In the blink of an eye, Jackson was gone from where he stood. The air rippled, and he reappeared behind the guards, knocking one out with a light tap to the neck and kicking another's blaster into the air. The weapon spun once and landed neatly in his hand. "Thanks for the gift," he said cheerfully, firing a few controlled shots that disarmed the rest without hitting a single vital point. Every movement was smooth, almost playful, as if he were dancing through the chaos. Lyra watched in disbelief from behind cover. "He's toying with them," she murmured. Mira giggled, her fear forgotten. "He's funny, Mommy." Within moments, the spaceport's main courtyard was littered with unconscious troopers. Jackson twirled the blaster, tossed it aside, and sauntered toward a sleek silver ship with angular wings and an obsidian canopy. It was beautiful and unmistakably Imperial. "Are you mad?" Lyra hissed, running after him. "That ship belongs to a high-ranking officer. It's coated with military clearance. You can't even start it without." Without improvising, Jackson interrupted, pressing his palm against the access panel. The console blinked red, then yellow, then suddenly flashed green. The ramp hissed open. Lyra's jaw dropped. "How did you?" "Trade secret," he said, flashing a grin. "You'd be surprised what works when you try every wrong password at once." They hurried inside, the doors sealing shut behind them. The ship's interior was sleek, cold, and humming with restrained power. Jackson slid into the pilot's chair like he'd been born there. "Ever flown before?" Lyra asked, strapping Mira into a seat. "Once or twice," Jackson said. "Usually ends with something exploding. Sometimes on purpose." Outside, the soldiers regrouped. A booming voice came through the external speakers. "Unidentified vessel. Stand down immediately or be destroyed." Jackson cracked his neck. They always say that right before they miss every shot. With a flick of his wrist, the engines roared to life. Blue light spilled across the bay as the ship trembled under its own power. "Hang on tight," Jackson shouted, slamming a lever forward. The ship launched off the pad like a bullet. Plasma fire rained around them as they shot into the sky, twisting and rolling through the chaos. Lyra screamed as G-forces pressed her against her seat. Mira laughed hysterically, clapping her tiny hands. Below them, the entire market turned into a whirl of flame and dust. Above, the cruiser waited. Jackson's grin widened. "All right, big guy," he muttered. "Let's see how bad your aim really is." The cruiser's cannons charged. Bolts of red light streaked through the clouds, missing them by inches. The ship's alarm blared in protest. "Can you outfly them?" Lyra yelled over the noise. "Outfly," Jackson said, turning the ship upside down just for fun. "No. Outthink, definitely." He pulled the ship into a steep climb, flying straight toward the cruiser's belly. Lyra's eyes went wide. "You're flying into it." "Exactly." The cruiser's sensors locked on, but Jackson darted through its defensive fire like a phantom, spinning and weaving between the blasts. Then, in one insane move, he cut the engines, letting the ship drift, before reigniting them to slingshot around the cruiser's hull. The enemy gunners panicked, firing wildly. Their shots hit their own shields, creating a cascade of explosions across their own ship. Oop! The streaks of hyperspace shimmered outside the viewport like rivers of liquid light. Inside the stolen Imperial vessel, silence filled the cockpit, the quiet after chaos. Lyra sat rigid in her seat, her daughter asleep against her shoulder. Jackson lounged in the pilot's chair, boots propped on the console, humming to himself as though they hadn't just escaped a planet crawling with death. Lyra's nerves couldn't match his calm. "You can stop smiling," she said coldly. "You just made us the most wanted fugitives in the sector." He didn't even look at her. "Correction, you already were. I just joined the fun club." She glared at him. "You think this is a game?" Jackson glanced sideways, that same infuriating grin on his face. "Everything's a game if you're bad enough at following the rules." Before she could snap back, a faint beeping interrupted them. A red light blinked on the console. "Oh," Jackson muttered. Lyra leaned forward. "What is it?" He sighed. "Empire's tracking beacon. They're good at hiding these in their ships. Clever people, shame about the personality." Lyra's face went pale. "Then they'll find us?" Jackson grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Not if we find them first." He tapped the controls rapidly, bringing up a holographic projection of nearby space. A crimson signal pulsed in the distance, a small Imperial scout ship moving fast, probably sent to locate their trail. Jackson pointed at it. "There's our tail. Let's give it a scare." "Scare?" Lyra asked warily. "Yeah," he said, flipping a few switches. "Ever heard of reverse hunting?" "No." "You're about to." With a sudden jolt, he cut the ship's engines. The stars snapped back to stillness. Then he engaged manual thrusters, turning the ship completely around to face the oncoming signal. "You're insane," she whispered again, gripping her seat. He winked. "And yet, still alive. That's gotta mean something." Moments later, the Imperial scout ship burst out of hyperspace, sleek, fast, deadly. Its sensors blinked as it realized the stolen vessel was right in front of it. "Too close. Too fast." "Smile for the camera," Jackson murmured, pressing a button. A flash of white light filled the cockpit, a decoy beacon overloaded behind them, blinding the scout sensors. Jackson's ship dove underneath the smaller craft, flipping belly up so close that their hulls almost touched. "Hold your breath," he said. He fired a pulse shot directly into the scout's engines. Not to destroy, but to disable. The smaller ship sputtered, spun, and drifted into darkness. Jackson leaned back, proud. "See? No explosions. I'm evolving." Lyra stared at him, half angry, half awed. "You could have killed us both." He shrugged. "Could've. Didn't. You're welcome." The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though she hated to admit it. "Where are we going now?" "Somewhere quiet," Jackson said, scanning the star map. "There's a moon nearby. Abandoned mining colony. Perfect for a nap or a dramatic conversation about destiny. Whichever you prefer." The ship descended into the orbit of a pale gray moon. Craters dotted its surface like scars. Jackson guided the craft down gently, landing between the rusted remains of mining towers. As the engines powered off, silence swallowed them again, deep, cold, and endless. Jackson stood, stretching. "All right, pit stop. Get some air. Maybe find a snack that doesn't glow." Lyra hesitated. "It's dangerous." "There could be." "Exactly," he interrupted. "Wouldn't want to miss out." Outside, the air was thin but breathable. The sky shimmered with the reflection of distant stars. Broken mining machines lay half-buried in dust, their lights long dead. Mira ran a few steps forward, chasing a drifting piece of metal like it was a butterfly. Lyra watched her daughter, heart heavy. She hasn't laughed like that since before everything. Jackson was beside her, his voice quieter now. "Then maybe it's time she did again." She turned to him, studying his face for the first time. The faint scar near his temple, the eyes too sharp to belong to a drifter. "Who are you really, Jackson? No one moves like that. No one fights like that." He looked at her for a moment, then gave a small smile. "Someone who's very bad at dying." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." He started walking toward an old control tower. "Come on. Let's see if this place still has power." Inside the tower, flickering lights came alive as Jackson tinkered with a dusty control panel. A holographic display blinked open, revealing static-filled images, Imperial messages, bounty listings, troop deployments. One alert caught Lyra's attention. Her name flashed across the screen. Lyra of House Cillian. Priority 1 target. Execution order authorized. Her stomach dropped. "They've erased my title," she whispered. "They're calling me a traitor." Jackson glanced at the display. "Yeah, they do that to anyone interesting." She turned to him sharply. You don't understand. The night on the desolate mining moon stretched endlessly, cold, still, and silent, except for the soft hum of the stolen ship's engines cooling in the dust. Lyra sat near the campfire Jackson had somehow sparked with a piece of metal and a grin, watching the flames dance against the endless void. Mira slept close by, curled under a thermal blanket, her small face peaceful for the first time in weeks. But Lyra's heart wouldn't rest. She stared into the fire, lost in thoughts of everything she had lost: her kingdom, her people, her husband. And yet, across from her sat the strangest man she'd ever met, casually roasting a piece of glowing fruit on a stick like they weren't fugitives hunted across the stars. "How can you be so calm?" she finally asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Do you not realize what we're up against? The Empire will send legions. They will never stop until we're ashes in the void." Jackson didn't look up from his fire. "You're right," he said softly. "They never stop." He flipped the fruit once. "But neither do I." Lyra frowned. "You speak as if you've faced them before." Jackson smirked faintly. "Not them exactly. But their type? Oh yeah. Every galaxy's got one. The kind that think fear builds order. The kind that confuse control for strength." He tossed the roasted fruit to her. "Eat. You'll need it." She caught it awkwardly, surprised. "You're serious about staying?" He leaned back on his elbows. "I'm serious about finishing what I start." Before she could reply, a sharp beep broke the quiet. The ship's internal alarms began to flash red. Jackson was on his feet instantly, his easy smile gone. "We've got company." Lyra ran to the hatch and peered out. On the far ridge, several small ships descended like black comets, unmarked, fast, and deadly. "Dropships. How did they find us?" she gasped. Jackson was already strapping on a wristband device that glowed faintly blue. "Empire doesn't give up easy. Looks like our disabled scout friend sent a distress ping before his nap." Lyra's panic rose. "There are too many of them. You can't fight all of that." He shot her a look. Calm, confident, and completely unshakable. "Watch me." Outside, dust swirled as the first dropship landed. Armored soldiers stormed out, their visors reflecting the pale moonlight. They spread out, forming a half-circle around the camp. Above them, a mechanical voice boomed through the comms. "Human combatant Jackson Vale and fugitive Lyra of House Cillian. Surrender immediately. Resistance will result in termination." Jackson smiled darkly. "They always say that part first." He turned to Lyra, his voice suddenly serious. "Take Mira and get inside the ship. Seal the doors. No matter what happens, don't come out until I say so." She hesitated. "But, go," he barked. The authority in his voice left no room for argument. She grabbed Mira and ran into the ship, the door sealing behind her with a hiss. Through the small viewport, she could still see him, a lone figure standing against a tide of soldiers. The first shots came, plasma fire lighting up the night in a storm of blue. Jackson moved like water, flowing through it all. He twisted, ducked, and weaved with impossible speed, deflecting bolts with a flick of his hand. His wristband flared, a pulse of energy expanded outward, sending half the soldiers flying into the air. Explosions tore through the ridge. Lyra's breath caught as she watched through the glass. This wasn't simple skill. This was something else. His movements were too fast, his precision too perfect. She realized then, whatever Jackson was, he wasn't just human in the ordinary sense. He was something more, something evolved by endless battles and impossible odds. Outside, the last soldier charged with a heavy blaster cannon. Jackson let him fire, then raised a single finger. The beam froze midair, suspended like light trapped in glass. The soldier stared, frozen in terror. "Here's a lesson," Jackson said quietly. "Power without purpose is just noise." With a flick, the energy dissipated. The man collapsed, unconscious. Then the ground shook. A massive shadow descended from above, a heavy assault ship. Its underbelly opened, revealing a figure in golden armor stepping down the ramp. His voice carried through the air, deep and commanding. "Human," the figure thundered. "You stand against the will of the Empire. Kneel, and I will grant you a swift end." Jackson tilted his head, unimpressed. "Sorry, I already tried kneeling once. Didn't like the view." The golden figure raised his arm. A shockwave rippled outward, hurling Jackson back several meters. Dust exploded around him. Lyra screamed from inside the ship. But Jackson rose slowly, wiping blood from his lip, eyes blazing. Finally, he muttered, "Someone interesting." He sprinted forward, faster than sight. The two collided in a blur of light and thunder. Shockwaves rippled through the valley. Energy blades clashed, their glow carven. The next dawn crept slowly across the dead mining moon, pale and cold, washing over the shattered battlefield where smoke still curled from the wreckage of Imperial ships. The silence was heavy, almost sacred, broken only by the faint hiss of cooling metal and the rhythmic hum of the stolen cruiser's engines idling nearby. Jackson stood on the ridge, shirt torn, blood drying on his knuckles. The rising light painted him in shades of gold and shadow. Behind him, Lyra approached carefully, her daughter still asleep inside the ship. She stopped beside him, wrapping her cloak tighter around her shoulders. "They'll be back," she said softly. "With more ships. More soldiers." Jackson didn't answer right away. He was staring at the horizon, where the stars still lingered like ghosts. When he finally spoke, his tone was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Good. I was starting to get bored." She frowned. "You treat everything like a joke. Even war." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "If I stop laughing at the darkness, it wins. Humans, we laugh so we don't forget we're alive." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. "You hide pain behind humor." Jackson chuckled dryly. "That's one way to say it. Another is, I've lost enough to know crying doesn't fix much." She wanted to ask more, but before she could, the ship's console beeped, an incoming transmission. Jackson turned sharply. "Incoming signal? Out here." They hurried inside. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing the image of an older human man in a tattered military uniform. His eyes widened as he saw Jackson. "Vale," the man said, his voice crackling with static. "We thought you were dead." Jackson leaned on the console, smirking. "You know me, Commander. I don't die easy. What's the news?" The man's expression darkened. "The Empire's expanding faster than we can counter. They've captured 3 more human colonies near the Orion Belt. Refugees are scattered across the outer rim. We're losing people." Lyra's heart clenched. "They're enslaving humans." "Not just humans," the commander said grimly. "Any species that stands with them. But humanity, we're their favorite target. The Emperor claims humans are a contamination spreading across the stars." Jackson's grin faded completely. "Then it's time we remind him what contamination can do when it fights back." The commander nodded. "We've gathered what's left of the Free Systems fleet. We need you, Vale. People still tell stories about you, about how you stopped the Hellion Armada with a single cruiser." Jackson sighed. "That was a long time ago." "Then make it happen again," the commander said. "Meet us in the Vega Drift. If the Empire tracks you first, we'll all be dead before the week's over." The transmission cut. Silence filled the cockpit. Lyra turned to Jackson, searching his face. "You were a soldier once, weren't you?" He didn't answer right away. "Not a soldier," he said finally. "Just someone who got tired of watching humans kneel." Lyra's voice softened. "And you stopped fighting?" He looked at her, really looked, and she saw something deep behind his grin this time. Guilt, old and heavy. "After my crew died," he said quietly. "After I realized saving the galaxy didn't save me." Lyra stepped closer. "Then save someone else this time." "Save her." She pointed toward the sleeping Mira. "Because if the Empire finds her again, they'll use her to destroy everything good left in the stars." For the first time since she'd met him, Jackson didn't have a witty reply. He simply nodded. Moments later, the ship rumbled as he powered the engines. The stars outside grew brighter through the cockpit glass. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked. "Vega Drift," Jackson said. "But we'll need to move fast. The Empire won't let me reunite with old friends without sending a welcoming committee." Lyra frowned. "We can't outrun an entire fleet." "Who said anything about running?" The ship lifted off the lunar surface, leaving the broken battlefield behind. As they pierced the clouds, Lyra caught sight of something glinting below, the fallen golden warrior's shattered armor. For a moment, she thought she saw it twitch, a faint pulse of light flickering inside. But then the clouds swallowed it whole. Inside the ship, Mira awoke and climbed into her mother's lap, yawning. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" Lyra brushed her hair gently. "For now, my starling." Jackson glanced back at them, his voice steady. "No one's ever truly safe. But if I have my way, She'll grow up in a galaxy that fears the word human again, not because we're monsters, but because we don't break. Lyra smiled faintly. Then maybe the stories will call you a hero. He looked ahead, at the stars streaking past as the ship prepared to jump. Heroes die young, he said quietly. I'd rather be the one who survives to make sure the story's told right. The ship's lights dimmed. The hum of the engines grew louder. Jackson gripped the black sea of hyperspace churned around them, streaks of blue and silver light bending like rivers of time. Inside the ship, the quiet hum of the engines was the only sound, until the navigation console began flashing crimson. A proximity alarm. Jackson's eyes narrowed. Well, that didn't take long. Lyra leaned over the console. Is it the Empire? He nodded. They found us faster than I expected. Either they've improved their tracking tech, or that golden tin down there wasn't as dead as he looked. Her breath caught. You mean? Yep. Jackson's grin returned, cold and sharp. Looks like the Empire's bringing round two. Outside the viewport, space rippled, and then tore open. Massive cruisers emerged from hyperspace, their hulls black and gold, their weapons already glowing with charge. The biggest of them bore a familiar insignia, a serpent devouring a star. Lyra's voice trembled. That's the Emperor's personal fleet. Cool, Jackson said, cracking his neck. I've always wanted a royal audience. Lyra stared at him in disbelief. This is madness. We'll die before we even get close. Then let's make it memorable. He slammed his hand on the control board. Mira, hold on to something. The ship roared to life, plunging straight toward the heart of the Imperial Armada. Blinding light filled the stars as hundreds of plasma cannons opened fire. The ship spun and twisted between the bolts like a spark dancing through a storm. Jackson's movements were impossibly fast, his instincts razor-sharp. Each dodge felt less like calculation and more like intuition. Jackson, Lyra shouted. There's too many. He grinned wildly. Good. I hate small crowds. But even his precision had limits. A heavy blast struck the ship's left wing, sending it spinning out of control. Warning lights screamed. Sparks flew across the cockpit. Mira cried out as the cabin shook violently. Lyra grabbed the controls beside him. We're losing power. Not yet, he growled. We've got one trick left. He yanked open a compartment beneath the console, revealing a crystal core pulsing faintly blue. Hypercell drive. Overclock it, and we turn this ship into a flashbang. Lyra's eyes widened. That would vaporize everything within 100 kilometers, including us. Jackson's smile softened. Not if I stay behind to trigger it manually. Lyra froze. No, you can't. Listen to me, he interrupted firmly. They're not after me. They're after her. Your daughter is proof that humanity and the Tsullian line can coexist, that the Empire's lies are dying. That's why they're afraid of her. She is the future. Lyra shook her head, tears in her eyes. You can't sacrifice yourself for us. He chuckled quietly. I'm not sacrificing myself. I'm buying you time. He tore a small data chip from the ship's control hub and pressed it into her palm. Coordinates to Vega Drift. Find the Free Systems fleet. Tell them humanity's not done yet. Jackson, she whispered. He smiled, his voice calm, almost peaceful now. I told you I don't do easy. Go make this galaxy interesting again. Before she could protest, he hit a switch. The ship's emergency escape pod launched, flinging Lyra and Mira into the void. Through the pod's small viewport, Lyra watched the scene unfold. Jackson's ship, small against the massive Imperial fleet, drifting closer to the center of their formation. Inside the flagship, the Golden Warrior, alive, though half his armor was shattered, stared at the incoming blip on his radar. He dares return? Jackson's voice echoed through the comms, calm and mocking. Miss me, Shiny? The Golden Warrior snarled. You cannot stop the Empire. Jackson smirked. No, but I can remind you how fragile gods look when they bleed. Then he pressed the detonator. For an instant, the universe lit up. A sphere of blinding white energy erupted from his ship, expanding outward in a storm of light and thunder. The entire Imperial fleet was caught in the blast, shields collapsing, engines overloading, ships vanishing in cascading fire. And then silence. From her pod, Lyra shielded Myra's eyes as the explosion faded. All that remained was starlight and drifting debris, and in the center, a single flare still glowing faintly blue. Jackson's light. Mira whispered softly. Mommy, is the funny man gone? Lyra held her close, her voice trembling. No, my love. People like him don't disappear. They become the stories that keep us brave. As their pod sped toward the Vega Drift, Lyra looked one last time at the distant flicker where the explosion had been. She smiled through her tears. Rest easy, Jacksonville, she murmured. The galaxy will remember you. Far away, among the debris of shattered ships, a faint signal blinked in the dark, a heartbeat of light, impossibly persistent. And somewhere in that endless night, a familiar voice laughed softly through the static. Still not dead. Told you, I don't do easy. The stars glimmered in reply, as if the galaxy itself had just remembered the name human.